There is a quiet exhaustion that doesn't come from working too much. It doesn't come from lack of sleep. It doesn't even come from failure. It comes from seeing too much. If you're listening to this and something inside you feels tired for reasons you can't fully explain, this is not coincidence. This video is not about motivation. It's not about productivity. It's not about fixing your life. It's about something far more uncomfortable. It's about what happens when your mind goes deeper than the world around you. Most people feel tired because life overwhelms them. But some people feel tired because they understand life too well. They notice things others pass by without seeing. They sense emotional undercurrents in conversations that seem casual to everyone else. They hear what is not said. They feel tension behind smiles. They recognize patterns before they become obvious. And slowly, silently, something begins to happen. You start feeling out of place, not because you think you're better than others, not because you reject people, but because the world starts to feel thin. Surface-level conversations feel draining. Small talk feels strangely heavy. Crowded places feel loud even when no one is shouting. You laugh, you participate, you function, but inside there's a growing sense that you are watching life through a glass wall. Close enough to see everything, too far to fully belong. This is the curse of depth, and no one warns you about it. From the outside, you seem fine. Responsible, thoughtful, calm, maybe even admired. But inside, your mind never really rests. You replay conversations long after they end. You question intentions. You search for meaning where others accept simplicity. You feel emotions that don't have clear names. And the strangest part, you often feel alone even when you're surrounded by people. Not lonely in the obvious sense, but unmet, unmirrored, unrecognized. It's the feeling of speaking a language no one else seems fluent in. You don't crave attention, you crave resonance. You don't want to be seen, you want to be understood. And when that doesn't happen, something inside you withdraws. Not dramatically, quietly. You start holding parts of yourself back. You simplify your thoughts so others won't feel uncomfortable. You laugh at jokes that don't land. You nod at ideas you don't believe. Not because you're dishonest, but because explaining yourself feels exhausting. Because every time you try, you hear the same responses. You think too much. It's not that deep. Why complicate things? Just let it go. And slowly, you learn that depth is inconvenient in a world built for speed. So you adapt. You become functional instead of authentic, present instead of connected, polite instead of honest. And over time, that adaptation creates a fracture between who you are internally and how you move through the world. This fracture is where alienation begins, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind that grows unnoticed. You start feeling like a foreigner in conversations that once felt normal. You feel older than your age, or sometimes strangely timeless. You feel like you arrived early to a world that isn't ready, or late to one that already moved on. And this creates a painful question most people never ask. Is something wrong with me? You don't ask it out loud. You ask it internally, in moments of silence. When you go home and feel relief, not because you escape people, but because you escape performing. When you sit alone and feel both comforted and unsettled by your own thoughts. When you realize your inner world feels more alive than your outer one. This is where many deep thinkers make a mistake. They assume alienation means superiority, or weakness, or brokenness. But none of those are true. Alienation, in this sense, is not arrogance. It's not social failure. It's not pathology. It's misalignment. A misalignment between a mind built for depth and a culture optimized for immediacy. We live in a world that rewards speed over reflection, certainty over nuance, visibility over substance. A world where opinions are louder than understanding, where being interesting matters more than being truthful, where attention is currency and silence feels suspicious. And in that environment, depth becomes a liability. Because depth slows you down, it complicates answers, it resists simplification. Depth asks questions that don't fit into captions. It notices contradictions. It refuses easy narratives. And when you live like that, you begin to feel like you're moving against the current. Not aggressively, just differently. You start noticing that most people are not listening, they're waiting to speak. Not feeling, but reacting. Not thinking, but repeating. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is the moment many people describe as waking up, but it doesn't feel like awakening. It feels like distance. Distance from the noise, distance from the collective rhythm, distance from the emotional shortcuts that make life feel easier for others. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Depth gives clarity, but clarity comes with cost. Because when you see beneath the surface, you also see the fragility behind confidence, the fear behind aggression, the emptiness behind endless consumption, the loneliness behind constant stimulation. And carrying that awareness without knowing how to integrate it is exhausting. You start feeling like you're carrying more weight than others, even though nothing visible has changed. This is why so many deep thinkers feel tired without knowing why. Why they withdraw without wanting to disappear. Why they crave connection but avoid crowds. It's not depression. It's not introversion alone. It's not social anxiety. It's the psychological weight of excess perception. And if you've ever wondered why you don't quite belong, even when nothing is obviously wrong, this is the beginning of the answer. But this is only the surface of the problem. Because the real trap doesn't start with depth itself. It starts with how depth is formed and what it silently teaches you about the world, about others, and about yourself. And that is where things become far more complicated. Because this way of seeing didn't appear by accident. In the next part, we're going to explore where this depth comes from, why it often forms early, and how it quietly turns into a psychological trap that keeps intelligent, sensitive people feeling permanently out of place. Not broken, not flawed, but displaced. And once you see that mechanism clearly, you'll never interpret your alienation the same way again. Depth does not appear randomly. People are not born feeling alienated from the world. They learn it quietly, early, often without anyone noticing. Most deep thinkers don't become deep because they wanted to. They became deep because at some point they had to. This is where many misunderstand their own story. They assume their depth comes from intelligence alone, or personality, or curiosity. But in most cases, depth is not a luxury. It's a response to an environment that demanded awareness before it offered safety. Think back, not to dramatic trauma, but to subtle moments. Moments when you learned that emotions were complicated, that moods could shift without warning, that silence meant something, that tension lived between words. Some children grow up in loud houses, others grow up in emotionally unpredictable ones. In both cases, the lesson is the same. Pay attention. When a child learns that emotional climates change quickly, they adapt by becoming observant. They watch faces. They read tone. They notice what isn't said. They become interpreters long before they are ready, not because they are anxious, but because anticipation feels safer than surprise. And slowly, a pattern forms. Instead of acting, they analyze. Instead of reacting, they absorb. Instead of expressing, they reflect. Their inner world begins to grow faster than their outer one. This is how depth starts. Not as philosophy, not as wisdom, but as protection. Over time, this protective awareness turns into something else. The child learns that thinking is safer than feeling out loud, that understanding others is more useful than being understood, that silence avoids conflict, that depth keeps them one step ahead. And so the mind becomes a shelter, a place where everything can be processed, replayed, reframed, controlled. The problem is, shelters can turn into fortresses. As this inner world grows richer, the external world starts to feel more chaotic, more rushed, more careless. Other people seem loud, impulsive, emotionally blunt, not evil, not stupid, just unaware. And this creates the first fracture. You realize you are carrying more awareness than the environment around you requires or rewards. So you downshift. You don't share everything you notice. You don't say everything you feel. You don't ask the questions that feel obvious to you but uncomfortable to others. You start editing yourself, and at first, this feels like maturity. You're being considerate, thoughtful, adaptable, but something subtle happens when you do this for too long. Your depth no longer feels like a strength. It starts to feel like a burden, because the more you perceive, the more responsibility you feel. Responsibility to understand, to empathize, to prevent conflict, to maintain emotional balance. You become the one who gets it, the one who sees both sides, the one who holds the nuance. And while others live freely inside simplified narratives, you live inside complexity. You start noticing that ignorance has a strange advantage. People who don't think deeply seem lighter, less conflicted, more decisive. They say things without overthinking. They move on quickly. They don't carry conversations with them for days. And this comparison hurts, because no one tells you that awareness comes with weight. No one prepares you for the loneliness of perception. At some point, you realize something unsettling. You can't go back. Once you learn to see layers, you can't return to flatness. Once you recognize patterns, you can't unsee them. Once you feel emotional subtext, you can't pretend it isn't there. This is when alienation deepens, not because you reject the world, but because the world feels incompatible with your internal pace. You slow down, the world speeds up. You question, the world simplifies. You reflect, the world reacts. And suddenly, everyday life feels oddly foreign. You begin to experience what philosophers call existential displacement. Not being lost, but being out of sync. You exist, but slightly off rhythm. This is why deep thinkers often feel older than their peers. They've spent years processing things others postpone. They've sat with discomfort instead of escaping it. They've questioned beliefs instead of inheriting them. And while this builds depth, it also builds distance, because shared reality depends on shared assumptions, and you stopped sharing those assumptions a long time ago. Another layer forms here. Many deep thinkers grow up learning that being emotionally expressive is unsafe or unproductive, so they become self-contained. They don't ask for help easily, they don't externalize distress, they don't dramatize pain, they internalize, and internalization, when combined with high perception, creates a feedback loop. The mind becomes both observer and container. It holds everything, and holding everything eventually becomes exhausting. But here's the most dangerous part of this formation. Depth slowly turns inward. Instead of understanding the world, you start over-analyzing yourself. You question your reactions, your tone, your motives, your place. You start wondering if you are the anomaly, because while your internal world feels rich, meaningful, alive, it doesn't seem to fit anywhere comfortably. So you oscillate between wanting connection and avoiding exposure, between craving intimacy and protecting solitude, between wanting to be seen and fearing misunderstanding. This oscillation creates chronic tension. You're never fully alone, but never fully connected. You exist in the in-between. And because this pattern developed gradually, you don't recognize it as learned. You experience it as identity. I'm just like this. I've always felt this way. This is who I am, but this is not the whole truth. What you are experiencing is not a flaw. It's a structure built from early adaptation, emotional intelligence, and repeated self-containment. And structures can be understood, but before they can be changed, they must be seen clearly. Because here's the critical shift. Depth itself is not the curse. The curse is carrying depth without context, without guidance, without mirrors, without integration. And when depth lacks integration, it turns against you. It becomes rumination, isolation, chronic self-questioning. And this is why so many deep thinkers feel both gifted and trapped. They have insight, but no outlet, awareness, but no resonance, sensitivity, but no shared language. And the world keeps telling them to simplify. But you can't simplify what was built to see complexity. You can only learn how to live with it differently. And that's where the real paradox begins. Because what if the very thing that makes you feel alienated is also the thing that could ground you, connect you, and give your life meaning, if understood correctly? That question is where everything changes. In the next block, we're going to confront the paradox directly. Why depth feels like a curse in a shallow world. Why those who seek understanding often feel the most isolated. And why alienation is not a sign of weakness, but a signal that something deeper is unfolding. Because once you understand the paradox of depth, you stop trying to escape it. And you start learning how to stand inside it without being consumed. Depth carries a paradox that few people talk about. The same awareness that expands your understanding also narrows your sense of belonging. This is not a contradiction, it's a consequence. Because depth changes how you relate to reality itself. Most people experience life through shortcuts. They rely on habits, social scripts, shared assumptions. They don't question much because questioning slows things down. They don't analyze deeply because analysis complicates things. And that's not stupidity, it's efficiency. Societies survive by simplification, but deep thinkers don't live comfortably inside simplified systems. Because once you begin seeing layers, you can't stop noticing them. You notice contradictions. You notice emotional subtext. You notice unspoken motives. You notice the gap between what people say and what they mean. And this awareness creates friction, not outward conflict, but internal distance. You start realizing that many conversations are rituals, not exchanges. Many opinions are inherited, not examined. Many values are performed, not lived. And this realization quietly isolates you, because belonging depends on shared illusions. When a group agrees not to question certain things, the one who questions becomes disruptive, even if silently. So what do? You soften your voice. You hide your questions. You keep your insights private. And this creates the paradox. The more you understand people, the less you feel understood by them. The more you empathize, the less space there is for your own inner life. You become fluent in others, but foreign to yourself. This is why deep thinkers often feel invisible, not because no one sees them, but because no one sees what they see. And when perception isn't shared, it doesn't bond, it separates. Another layer of the paradox appears here. Depth increases emotional bandwidth. You don't just feel happiness or sadness, you feel mixed states, ambivalence, contradiction. You can love and doubt at the same time. Care and question simultaneously. Feel gratitude and grief in the same moment, but the world prefers clean emotions, happy or sad, right or wrong, success or failure. So when you try to communicate your inner reality, it doesn't land. People hear complexity as confusion, nuance as indecision, reflection as hesitation, and slowly you stop translating yourself. You learn that compression is easier than explanation. You reduce yourself to fit conversations. You edit your thoughts. You abandon half-formed ideas because they take too long to explain. And this self-reduction hurts more than rejection, because you're not being misunderstood. You're being simplified. This is where alienation becomes existential, not social but ontological. You start feeling like your inner life exists on a different wavelength. You're not lonely because you lack people. You're lonely because the depth of your perception has no mirror. And humans need mirrors. We understand ourselves by being reflected accurately. When reflection is absent, identity destabilizes. You begin questioning yourself. Am I too much? Am I broken? Why does everything feel heavier for me? But the paradox sharpens here. Depth gives you clarity, but clarity removes illusions. And illusions are what most people use to stay comfortable. Illusions about control, about permanence, about meaning being obvious. Deep thinkers see through these illusions early. They recognize uncertainty as fundamental. They see impermanence everywhere. They feel meaning as something fragile, constructed, earned. This awareness doesn't make you cynical. It makes you careful. But care is often mistaken for pessimism. You don't celebrate blindly. You don't commit thoughtlessly. You don't promise lightly. And this makes you appear distant. People think you're detached, when in reality you're deeply engaged, just not impulsively. And here's the quiet tragedy. Depth makes you capable of profound connection, but it also makes shallow connection unbearable. You can't unfeel when something lacks sincerity. You can't ignore when something feels hollow. You can't pretend enthusiasm when there's no substance. So you withdraw, not because you dislike people, but because surface-level engagement feels like emotional noise. This is where many deep thinkers get stuck. They confuse alienation with superiority, or worse, with defectiveness, but neither is true. Alienation is not arrogance, and it is not pathology. It is misalignment, a mismatch between internal complexity and external structures. Modern life accelerates this mismatch: speed over depth, performance over reflection, visibility over meaning. The more the world rewards immediacy, the more depth feels out of place. And yet, paradoxically, depth is what gives life weight. Without it, experience becomes disposable. You consume moments instead of inhabiting them. You react instead of integrate. You move, but don't arrive. Deep thinkers sense this loss acutely. They feel when something is missing, even if they can't name it, and that sensitivity hurts. Because you're grieving something others don't even notice is gone. This is why awareness often feels like a burden before it feels like a gift. You carry truths without infrastructure. You see, but don't yet know how to live with what you see. And this is the core paradox. Depth separates you from the crowd, but it also gives you access to something the crowd can't reach. Meaning. But meaning doesn't come automatically. It requires integration. Without integration, depth turns inward and becomes isolation. With integration, depth becomes orientation, and most people never reach that second stage. They stay trapped in awareness without direction, but awareness alone is incomplete. It's like having sight without movement. You see the landscape clearly, but don't know where to walk. This is why many deep thinkers feel tired rather than empowered. They perceive too much, but haven't yet learned how to use perception. And that is the pivot point. Because the question is no longer, why do I feel alienated? The question becomes, how do I live inside depth without drowning in it? That question is not philosophical curiosity, it's survival, and answering it changes everything. In the next block, we'll move from paradox to orientation. We'll explore the difference between isolation and solitude, between withdrawal and grounding, between depth as a weight and depth as a compass. Because the moment you stop fighting your depth and start structuring your relationship with it, alienation loses its grip, and depth begins to do what it was always meant to do, not separate you from life, but anchor you within it. There is a crucial distinction that changes everything for people with depth. Most never learn it. And because they don't, they suffer unnecessarily. The distinction is this: isolation is what happens when depth turns against you. Solitude is what happens when depth finally supports you. They look similar from the outside, but internally they are opposites. Isolation is reactive. Solitude is intentional. Isolation feels like exile. Solitude feels like alignment. When you are isolated, your inner world becomes a loop. Thoughts circle back on themselves. Questions multiply without resolution. Emotions echo without release. You're not resting in silence. You're trapped inside it. Isolation drains energy. Solitude restores it. And the difference between the two is not how many people are around you. It's whether your inner life has structure. Deep thinkers often mistake isolation for solitude because both involve withdrawal. But withdrawal without grounding is not refuge. It's erosion. When you retreat without intention, your mind doesn't settle. It accelerates. You replay conversations. You analyze past moments. You anticipate future misunderstandings. Your depth becomes a closed system, and closed systems eventually suffocate. This is why alienation intensifies when depth has no outlet. You're absorbing more than you're processing. You're perceiving more than you're integrating, and integration is the missing skill. Solitude is not the absence of people. It's the presence of orientation. In solitude, your inner world is not chaotic. It's arranged, not perfectly, but deliberately. You are no longer hiding from the world. You are preparing to meet it on your own terms. Historically, solitude has always been the domain of thinkers, creators, and philosophers, but not because they disliked humanity, because they understood something subtle. Clarity requires space. Noise compresses thought. Speed fragments meaning. Solitude creates coherence. Marcus Aurelius did not withdraw because he was antisocial. He withdrew to preserve integrity. His meditations were not escapism, they were calibration. He used solitude to remind himself who he was before the world told him who to be. That is the function of true solitude, to reconnect you with your axis. Isolation disconnects you from others and from yourself. Solitude reconnects you to yourself so you can re-enter the world without distortion. This is where many deep thinkers fail. They withdraw, but they don't anchor. They retreat inward, but without ritual, without rhythm, without boundaries. So the mind turns into a courtroom. Every thought is prosecuted, every emotion cross-examined, every memory reopened, and instead of grounding, they spiral. Solitude must be shaped. Otherwise, depth becomes excess. Here is the essential truth. Depth without structure becomes rumination. Depth with structure becomes wisdom. Solitude requires three elements: containment, expression, return. Containment means your inner life has limits. You don't let every thought run endlessly. You don't indulge every emotional wave. You allow silence, but not stagnation. This is why rituals matter. Writing at the same time each day, walking without stimulation, sitting in quiet with a defined beginning and end. Containment turns solitude into a vessel, not a void. Expression is the second element. Depth cannot remain internal forever. What stays unexpressed becomes pressure. Writing, speaking, creating, teaching, even thinking aloud. Expression is not about performance. It's about movement. When you express, you externalize complexity. You give form to the formless. This prevents your inner world from collapsing inward. Kafka understood this when he said that writing was not art for him, but necessity. Without expression, depth turns corrosive. With expression, it becomes generative. And finally, return. This is the part most people avoid. Solitude is not meant to replace the world. It is meant to prepare you to re-enter it. You do not withdraw to disappear. You withdraw to realign. Then you return with clearer boundaries, fewer illusions, and stronger discernment. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. You stop over-explaining. You stop shrinking. You don't need to be loud. You don't need to dominate. You simply occupy your space without apology. This is when alienation begins to dissolve, not because the world suddenly understands you, but because you no longer require universal understanding. You understand yourself well enough to choose where connection is possible and where silence is wiser. This is not withdrawal from life. This is selective engagement. Deep thinkers often feel pressure to either fully adapt or fully withdraw. But there is a third path, anchored participation. You engage without dilution. You connect without self-erasure. You belong without betrayal. And this is only possible when solitude replaces isolation, when your inner world becomes a place of grounding, not escape, when silence becomes nourishment, not punishment. This shift changes everything. You stop resenting others for not meeting you at your depth. You stop resenting yourself for feeling too much. You accept the asymmetry. Not everyone will meet you there, and that's not a failure. It's reality. Depth is not meant to be distributed evenly. It's meant to be carried responsibly. And once you carry it responsibly, it stops isolating you. It stabilizes you. You become calmer, not heavier, more discerning, not distant, more rooted, not withdrawn. This is when depth stops feeling like a curse and starts feeling like orientation. But one final step remains. Because grounding alone is not enough. You still have to live, to act, to choose, to move forward. In the final block, we'll integrate everything. We'll talk about how to live with depth in a superficial world without becoming bitter, numb, or invisible. How to turn alienation into clarity, sensitivity into strength, and depth into direction. Because depth was never meant to trap you, it was meant to guide you. At this point, something should be clear. Your depth was never the problem. The suffering came from not knowing how to live with it in a world that doesn't slow down, doesn't listen deeply, and doesn't reward introspection. Alienation was not caused by being different. It was caused by trying to survive depth without a framework, and now everything converges here. The final question is not why you feel alienated. You already know that. The real question is, how do you live deeply without disappearing? How do you remain sensitive without becoming fragile? How do you stay introspective without withdrawing from life? The answer is integration. Integration means you stop trying to resolve the tension between depth and the world. You carry it instead. You accept that you will never fully belong to surface culture, and you stop resenting that. You accept that your inner world will always be louder than average, and you stop fighting it. You accept that misunderstanding will happen, and you stop explaining yourself to death. This acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. When you integrate depth, you no longer seek permission to exist as you are. You stop asking, is there something wrong with me? And start asking, where does my nature belong? Depth does not belong everywhere. And that is not tragedy. That is discernment. You don't need to be understood by many. You need to be understood by enough. Enough to stay human. Enough to stay grounded. Enough to stay real. Integration also means recognizing the cost of depth without romanticizing it. Yes, you feel more. Yes, you notice more. Yes, you carry more existential weight. But you are not meant to carry everything. Part of maturity is learning what to release. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every emotion deserves interpretation. Not every insight needs expression. Depth becomes destructive when it turns compulsive. Wisdom begins when depth becomes selective. You learn to ask, is this reflection leading me somewhere? Or is it keeping me stuck? Is this sensitivity helping me connect? Or is it isolating me further? Is this solitude nourishing, or am I hiding? These questions are not accusations. They are anchors. They keep depth functional instead of overwhelming. Integration also requires something deeply uncomfortable for sensitive thinkers. Action, not performative action, not frantic productivity, but grounded, embodied movement. Depth that never touches reality becomes abstraction, and abstraction eventually collapses into despair. You don't need to conquer the world, but you do need to participate in it, through work that feels meaningful, through creation that feels honest, through relationships that don't require masks. Even one of each is enough. Depth does not need a crowd, it needs roots. This is where many alienated thinkers miss their turning point. They wait to feel understood before they live, but life doesn't work that way. You live first, meaning follows. When you stop waiting for recognition, you paradoxically become more grounded. Because your life stops being a question, it becomes a stance. You stand somewhere, quietly, firmly, not demanding attention, not shrinking to avoid it, just present. And presence changes how the world meets you. Not because people suddenly understand depth, but because they sense coherence. Depth integrated becomes gravity. People may not articulate why they respect you, but they feel it. You move slower, you speak less, but when you do, it carries weight. You are no longer trying to translate your soul into something digestible. You let it be what it is. Those who resonate will recognize it. Those who don't were never meant to. This is not elitism, it's ecology. Not every environment supports every organism. A fish does not apologize for drowning on land. It finds water. Depth requires the same intelligence. Integration also means redefining success. For deep thinkers, success is not visibility, it's coherence. It's waking up without inner fragmentation. It's living without self-betrayal. It's not numbing yourself just to survive. It's being able to sit with yourself in silence without needing distraction, explanation, or escape. That is rare, and it matters more than applause. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not maladapted. You are simply built for a slower, more intentional form of living inside a culture addicted to speed. And once you accept that, the alienation loosens. It doesn't disappear completely, but it transforms. It becomes distance without bitterness, solitude without loneliness, sensitivity without collapse. You stop feeling cursed and start feeling responsible. Responsible for your inner world, responsible for your energy, responsible for how deeply you engage. Depth stops being something that happens to you. It becomes something you use, and that is the final shift. The curse of depth was never depth itself. It was carrying it unconsciously. Now you know, and knowing changes how you walk forward. Not louder, not faster, but clearer. If this reflection stayed with you longer than expected, that matters. Subscribe to the channel for more long-form explorations like this. And before you go, leave a comment. Not to explain yourself, not to perform, just answer this. What part of depth has been hardest for you to carry? Your answer might help someone else feel less alone, and sometimes that's enough.